Mira Vale knew 3 things with absolute certainty as she knelt in the ash circle. First, the council wanted her to call the child cursed. Second, if she refused, they would execute her before sunrise. Third, the man they had summoned to kill her was standing 10 feet behind her, and she could feel the weight of his silence like a blade pressed against the base of her skull. She had spent 6 years saving lives in this temple, 6 years pulling fever from bone, stitching wounds that should have been fatal, talking women through births that wanted to go sideways. She had done it quietly, without fuss, without ever once bothering the council for supplies or recognition or permission to keep people breathing. And now those same people, the ones whose children she had saved, whose partners she had pulled back from the edge, whose infections she had burned out with herbs and will and hands that did not shake no matter how bad it looked, they were all sitting in this courtroom watching her kneel in front of a 6-year-old boy and waiting for her to destroy him. The silence in the room had weight, the kind that pressed on your shoulders and made your ribs feel too tight. Mira kept her spine straight anyway. Stay calm. Stay with this story to see what happens when a powerless healer refuses to condemn an innocent child. A silent alpha king is forced to become her executioner, and a mark everyone calls a curse turns out to be the one thing that could bring an entire corrupt system to its knees. Because Rowan was not cursed. He was the evidence. The bowl of moon ash sat on a black stone pedestal directly in front of Mira, silver, hand-carved with tiny wolves running beneath a crescent moon, filled with ash that looked deceptively soft and smelled like cold metal, and very old prayers that had been repeated so many times. The words had worn smooth. Mira hated that bowl more than she had ever hated anything in her life. High Elder Varric stood above her on the judgment steps, white robes falling in perfect, practiced folds that had probably been adjusted 3 times before he left his chambers. Nothing about him shook. Not his hands, not his voice, not even the silver chain around his neck, though half the courtroom was breathing like frightened deer and the other half was pretending not to notice. Mira Vale, Varric said, his voice pitched low enough that the entire room had to lean forward to catch it. A technique. Everything about this man was a technique. You were given one chance to correct your mistake. Mistake. Such a generous word for treason. Like she had spilled soup on important documents. Like she had mislabeled 2 jars of fever root. Like she had not hidden a condemned child beneath the infirmary floorboards for 9 consecutive nights, while the council methodically searched every servant room, every stable stall, every grain cellar, and every forgotten corner of the temple looking for him. Rowan had counted those nights by whispering numbers against the fabric of her sleeve, so quiet she could barely hear him. 1, when he still believed with the desperate certainty of children that his mother was coming back to get him. 2, when he finally stopped asking if she was okay wherever she was. 3, when he woke from nightmares with both small hands pressed flat over the mark beneath his ribs and said absolutely nothing, just stared at the darkness until morning came. That silence had frightened Mira more than any amount of crying ever could. You stole a cursed child from lawful purification, Varric continued, each word enunciated with the kind of care people used when they wanted you to understand this was your last warning. You concealed him from the council's sight. You fed him food meant for the infirmary patients. You sheltered him in sacred space. You lied to guards, to elders, to your own supervisor about his whereabouts. Mira's throat was desert dry, but she managed to get words out anyway. I treated a sick child who needed help. A murmur moved through the gallery like wind through tall grass, everyone shifting just slightly in their seats. Varric's smile appeared, small and kind and utterly practiced, the sort of expression a man wore when he wanted the room to believe that mercy had been carefully considered, and sadly, regrettably found impractical given the circumstances. You treated active contamination, he said. You put this entire community at risk. Beneath the white deathcloth that covered him from head to foot, Rowan's fingers tightened around Mira's hand hard enough that she could feel his pulse hammering against her knuckles. Mira did not look down at him. If she looked, if she saw his face, she would do something irreparably stupid, more stupid than she had already been. And Mira had climbed several truly impressive levels of stupid this week. The week was not over yet. He is 6 years old, she said, keeping her voice as level as possible. He is marked with the moon fracture, Varric countered. He is a child who was born with something he did not choose and cannot control. He is a carrier of generational corruption that will spread through this pack like rot through a foundation beam if not stopped now. He was hungry and scared and alone. That one landed badly. Not because it was a clever argument. It was not remotely clever. But hungry was such a simple word. Hungry was a thing everyone in this room understood in their bones. It was very difficult to make hungry sound holy or theoretical, or like something that could wait for proper council procedure. In the second row of the gallery, a woman Mira knew as Marin Ashlow lowered her eyes to the floor. Last winter, Marin's 7-year-old son had nearly died from lung rot that spread so fast, Mira had barely caught it in time. Mira had stayed awake for 2 straight nights in that boy's room, monitoring his breathing, adjusting the steam, making sure the congestion did not drown him from the inside out. She had held Marin's hand when Marin started shaking too hard to stand, and she had promised that her son would live. And she had kept that promise. Now Marin was staring at the stone floor like it might contain answers and refusing to meet Mira's gaze. Something inside Mira's chest folded in on itself and went cold and hard. "Do not seek comfort from the gallery," Varric said, his tone shifting just slightly towards something that might have been genuine sympathy if you did not know better. "They are here to witness your choice, not to make it for you." Mira was the person the pack called when a child stopped breathing in the night. When a hunter came home with his side torn open and bleeding out faster than tourniquets could stop it. When an omega bled for too long after a difficult birth and needed hands that knew exactly where to press and how hard, she had saved them all, quietly, without asking for recognition, without keeping records that might get anyone in trouble, without ever, not once, bothering the council for permission to do what healers were supposed to do. And now those same people sat in neat rows in the gallery and watched her kneel in the ash circle with her hands bound in silver thread and said nothing. Not one word. Not one objection. "Speak the words, Mira," Varric said, and his voice had gone soft now, almost fatherly. "Another technique. Tell us what the child is, and this can end." The silver thread wrapped around Mira's wrists began to warm. Not enough to burn, not yet. Just enough to remind her that it could. That it would, if she pushed too far. Rowan's hand was trembling beneath hers now, small and damp with sweat. The white deathcloth covered his entire body, draped over him like a shroud, but Mira knew exactly what was underneath it even without looking. Black hair that stuck damply to his forehead when he was scared, a bruised left cheek from where he had fallen, climbing down into the space beneath the infirmary floor on the first night. A mouth that he kept pressed into a tight, thin line because someone, one of the guards probably, had told him that cursed children cried poison into the air whenever they wept, and Rowan, being 6 years old and far too obedient for his own good, had believed them absolutely. And beneath his threadbare shirt, hidden under layers of cloth and fear, and a childhood that had been stolen from him 3 months ago, was the mark. A crescent moon cracked down the center. The council called it the moon fracture, and they said it was the visible sign of a living curse, the kind that spread through bloodlines like disease through a water supply. Every healer in the pack knew the law by heart because it was one of the oldest laws the council had. Any child found bearing the moon fracture had to be purified before the next black moon rose, or the curse would spread outward from that child into their entire family line, corrupting everyone it touched until the pack itself rotted from within. The law was absolute. The law did not bend. Mira had examined that mark. She had pressed her fingers directly against it, had tested it with every method she knew, had watched it under candlelight for 3 full nights in a row, while Rowan slept fitfully on the infirmary cot. Curses spread. That was what they did. They moved outward like ink in water, darkening veins, stealing heat from living tissue, leaving cold spots that you could feel if you knew what to look for. Rowan's mark did not spread. It did not darken anything. It did not steal heat. It sat on his skin like a scar and did absolutely nothing. Earlier, during the binding ritual before the trial officially started, a few grains of moon ash had slipped over the edge of the ceremonial bowl, drifting down through the air and landing on the bare skin of Rowan's wrist, where the sleeve of his shirt had ridden up. Cursed skin attracted moon ash. The ash was supposed to stick to it, cling to it, darken on contact like iron shavings to a lodestone. Mira had watched those grains of ash hit Rowan's skin and slide right off, falling away like water off oiled leather. Her heart had slammed once, twice, hard against her ribs. Varric had seen it too. She had watched his eyes track the falling ash, had seen the moment of recognition flicker across his face before he smoothed it away into nothing, and called for the trial to begin immediately, an hour ahead of schedule, before anyone else in the room had time to notice what she had just seen. "Mira," Varric said now, and his voice had dropped lower, become almost kind. Almost. "No one in this room wishes to cause you harm. You are a valuable member of this community. You have saved lives. You are respected." He paused, letting that word hang in the air like bait on a hook. "You were misled by your own compassion," he continued. "Compassion is a healer's greatest strength, and sometimes, regrettably, their greatest weakness. You saw a child in distress and you acted on instinct. That is not a crime. Not when it can be corrected." He gestured toward the bowl of moon ash with one pale hand. "Place your fingers in the ash, Mira. Mark the child with the sign of contamination. Speak the words we all know to be true. Then step out of this circle, return to your work, and let us handle this the way it needs to be handled. Return to the infirmary. Keep the small room behind the supply curtain that served as her quarters. Keep the shelf of carefully labeled herb jars. Keep the cot by the window. Keep being useful to people who would forget this entire day had ever happened, the very next time they needed willow bark for a headache or a poultice for an infected wound." Rowan's thumb moved very slowly across the back of her knuckle. A tiny motion, deliberate. Mira bent her head slightly, just enough that her voice would carry down to him and nowhere else. "Rowan." He went completely still. "Are you afraid right now?" A pause that felt like it lasted for years. Then, so quietly she almost could not hear it, even though he was right next to her. "Yes, me too," Mira whispered back. Then she straightened her spine, lifted her head, and looked directly at High Elder Varric with eyes that did not blink. "I will not mark this child," she said clearly, "because he is not cursed." The courtroom went so silent that Mira could hear the candles burning in their holders along the walls. Varric's expression did not change, but something cold and sharp moved behind his eyes, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Then you condemn yourself to death." "If speaking the truth out loud is a crime in this pack," Mira said, her voice steady even though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest, "then your laws are the thing that needs purification." Someone in the gallery gasped. Varric raised one hand, and the guards stationed along the walls stepped forward in perfect unison, their boots hitting the stone floor with identical sounds. "Mira Vale," Varric said, and now his voice had gone flat and formal. All pretense of kindness dropped like a mask that was no longer needed. "You are found guilty of treason against the Moon Ash Council, conspiracy to harbor a cursed abomination, and willful corruption of sacred space. The sentence is death by purification fire at sunrise tomorrow morning." Mira's pulse kicked hard enough to make her dizzy, but she kept her face completely still. Varric turned toward the back of the courtroom, and his tone shifted again, became ceremonial. "Alpha King Kale Thorn, you have been summoned to this chamber under blood oath to serve as executioner for this sentence. Do you accept the charge placed upon you?" The silence that followed was so complete that Mira could hear her own heartbeat thudding in her ears like a drum. Then a voice answered from the shadows at the very back of the hall, and it sounded like gravel being crushed under stone, like something that had forgotten how words were supposed to work. "I accept." Mira turned, and the movement made the silver threads around her wrists tighten just slightly. A reminder. The man who stepped forward into the firelight was tall, broad across the shoulders in a way that suggested either a lot of hard physical labor or a wolf form that ran large, and he moved like something that had spent too long alone in wild places and forgotten how to navigate spaces with walls. His hair was dark, too long, falling past his collar in uneven lengths. His clothes were travel-worn and stained, practical layers that had been mended more than once. His face was angular, marked with old scars, and completely unreadable, but it was his eyes that made Mira's breath catch and hold. Silver. Not the pale gray of moonlight on water. True metallic silver, like molten metal poured into a mold, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to look away immediately, and simultaneously made it impossible to do so. Alpha King Kale Thorne. Mira had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had heard the stories. The Alpha who had walked away from his throne 5 years ago and vanished into the wild lands without explanation. The wolf who hunted alone, answered to no pack, no council, no law except whatever he made for himself out there in the territories beyond the borders. The man guards whispered about when they thought healers were not listening. The one they said had gone completely feral, more animal than person now. Looking at him in this moment, standing at the edge of the firelight with those silver eyes and that absolute stillness, Mira believed every single story she had ever heard. He stopped 3 paces away from the edge of the ash circle and looked at Varric without blinking, without speaking, just waiting. "Where?" he said finally, and it was not a question, just a single word that demanded information. "The Bone Tower," Varric said, "at the eastern edge of the temple grounds. You will remain with the prisoner from now until dawn. At sunrise, you will escort her to the purification pyre in the main courtyard and carry out the sentence as witnessed by the council and the pack." Kale's expression did not change at all. He looked at Mira for one very long moment, and she could not read a single emotion in those silver eyes. Then he said, "Move." The guards unbound the silver threads from her wrists and pulled her to her feet. Mira's legs had gone numb from kneeling, and she stumbled slightly before catching her balance. Rowan was still on the ground beside her, still covered in the white deathcloth, and he made a sound when she stood, a small broken noise that went through her chest like a knife. "The child stays here," Varric said. Mira's head snapped around. "No." Varric's smile returned, colder than before. "The child is council property now. He will be purified tomorrow at dawn as well, immediately following your execution. You may spend your final hours knowing that you failed him completely." Rowan made that sound again, and this time Mira could see him shaking beneath the cloth. She started to move toward him, some desperate, stupid instinct overriding every bit of common sense she had left, but Kale's hand closed around her upper arm before she took 2 steps. Not rough, not gentle, just completely immovable, like being grabbed by a boulder. "Do not," he said quietly, and his voice had dropped low enough that only she could hear it. "You will only make it worse for him." Mira looked down at Rowan, at the small shape of him huddled on the cold stone floor, and she wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. She wanted to do something, anything, that would change what was about to happen. She had absolutely nothing. "Rowan," she said, and her voice cracked on his name. "I am so sorry." Then Kale pulled her toward the door, and the guard stepped forward to block her view, and Rowan was gone. The walk to the Bone Tower took 20 minutes through corridors Mira had never seen before, passages that ran along the outer edges of the temple complex where the stone was older and the air smelled like minerals and old darkness. Kale walked ahead of her, his hands still wrapped around her arm, not dragging her but not letting go either, just maintaining steady forward pressure. 2 guards followed behind them, far enough back that they were out of easy earshot but close enough to intervene if Mira tried anything stupid. She did not try anything. Her mind was spinning too fast, thoughts scattering like startled birds, unable to land on anything useful. Rowan was going to die at dawn. She was going to die at dawn. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing, she could do to stop either of those things from happening. The Bone Tower sat at the very eastern edge of the temple grounds, built directly into the cliff face like a tooth growing out of stone. It was old, older than the rest of the temple, made from blocks of granite that had been cut and fitted so precisely you could not slide a knife blade between them. The door was solid iron and it swung open without a sound, which was somehow worse than if it had creaked. Inside was a single room. Stone floor, stone walls, stone ceiling. A window too narrow and too high to reach even if you could climb. A pile of straw in one corner that might have been meant as a bed once. Nothing else. Kale stepped inside and released her arm. The guards pulled the door shut behind them, and Mira heard the sound of a bar dropping into place from the outside, metal on metal, final as a coffin lid closing. She stood very still in the center of the room and tried to make her lungs work properly. Kale moved to the window and stopped there, standing with his back to her, looking out at something she could not see. "The door is locked from the outside," he said without turning around. "Do not bother testing it." Mira pressed both hands flat against the iron door anyway and pushed. It did not move. Not even slightly. She pushed harder, throwing her full weight against it, and her palms slammed into the metal hard enough to sting. "Stop," Cale said. Mira ignored him and kept pushing, kept slamming her hands against the door over and over, and her breathing was coming too fast now, too shallow, and the edges of her vision were starting to blur. I said stop. She did not stop. Could not stop. If she stopped pushing, if she stopped fighting, then it was over. Rowan was dead, she was dead, and it was over. Cale crossed the room in 3 strides and caught both her wrists, pulling her hands away from the door with enough force that she stumbled backward. "You are bleeding," he said flatly. Mira looked down at her hands. The skin across both palms was scraped raw, blood welling up in thin, dark lines across the flesh, where she had hit the metal too hard too many times. She had not felt it happen. She had not felt anything. Cale held her wrists for a moment longer, examining the damage, then released her and stepped back. "Sit down." "I do not take orders from you," Mira said, and her voice sounded strange in her own ears, too high and too tight. "Tonight you do." "You are here to execute me," Mira said, "not give me advice about where to sit." Cale's expression did not change. "I am here to make sure you do not bleed out before dawn. Sit down." Mira's jaw tightened so hard her teeth ached. No. They stared at each other for a long moment, and Mira could not read anything in those silver eyes except maybe a deep, bone-level exhaustion. Then Cale pulled a small cloth from his belt and said, very quietly, "Please sit down." It was the please that did it. Mira sat, not because he had ordered it, but because her legs felt like they might give out anyway. Cale knelt in front of her, which put them almost at eye level, and took her left hand in both of his. His hands were large, scarred across the knuckles, rough with calluses, but surprisingly careful as he began cleaning the blood away from her palm with the cloth. "Why did you do it?" he said, and this time it was not a question. "Do what specifically?" "Protect a child you had never met before. His mother brought him to you 3 months ago." Mira watched him work, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Because he needed help. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." Cale was quiet for a moment, focused on her hand. Then he said, without looking up, "You threw your entire life away for a stranger's child. No pack will take you now. No council will defend you. You will burn at sunrise for nothing." "Not nothing," Mira said quietly. "He is 6 years old. He was terrified and alone and marked with something he cannot control, and they were going to burn him alive for it. And now they will burn you both," Cale said. "That does not qualify as winning." "I know. You knew that when you made your choice." "Yes." Cale finished with her left palm and moved to her right hand, his movements methodical. "That was colossally stupid." "I am aware. And you did it anyway." "Yes." He tied the cloth around her right palm, covering the worst of the scrapes, and sat back on his heels. Those silver eyes studied her for a long moment, and Mira could not tell what he was thinking. "Why?" he asked again. Mira met his gaze steadily. "If you are asking me why I would rather die than stand by and watch a child burn alive for no good reason, then you and I are never going to understand each other." Something shifted in Cale's expression. Not much, just a tiny crack in the flat stone. He stood and moved back to the window, his boots making no sound on the stone floor despite his size. "Get some sleep," he said. "Dawn comes early." Mira sat against the cold wall and did not sleep. She watched the narrow window, watched the stars move slowly across that small frame of sky, watched the moon rise and reach its peak and begin to descend. Cale stood at the window for hours without moving, did not sit, did not speak, did not do anything, except breathe and watch whatever was outside. Mira should have been terrified of him. She was, in a way, but not in the way she expected. Somewhere past midnight, when the moon had sunk low enough that its light no longer reached into the tower, Mira spoke into the silence. "Do you want to kill me?" Cale did not turn. "No." "Then why accept the charge?" "Blood oath." Mira frowned. "I do not understand." "The council holds leverage over me," Cale said, his voice completely flat. "If I refuse the charge, they will use it." "What kind of leverage?" He did not answer. Mira watched his silhouette against the window, backlit by stars. You do not seem like someone who bends easily to threats. Everyone bends, Kale said, so quietly she almost missed it. The only question is how much weight it takes. Mira closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the stone. I am sorry you were pulled into this mess. Save your apologies for the child. The words landed like a fist. Mira's eyes snapped open. If you helped me escape? No. You have not even heard what I was going to suggest. You were going to ask me to break my blood oath, betray the council, and help you rescue the boy. Kale turned slightly, just enough that she could see his profile against the window. The answer is no. They are going to burn him alive at sunrise, Mira said, her voice shaking now. A 6-year-old child who has done nothing wrong. I know. And you will do nothing. I will do exactly what I was summoned here to do, Kale said flatly. Execute you at dawn, then leave. Mira stood, her hands clenched into fists despite the pain in her palms. You are a coward. Kale's entire body went still. You abandoned your throne, Mira continued, anger burning through the fear now. You hid in the wilderness for 5 years. And now you stand here and tell me you will murder an innocent woman because a council you do not even serve told you to. She took a step toward him. You are not feral, Alpha King. You are just broken. The air in the room went tight and dangerous. Kale turned and crossed the space between them in 2 strides, stopping so close that Mira had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You know nothing about me, he said, his voice low and lethal. I know enough. Mira shot back. I know you are going to kill me at dawn. I know you are going to let them burn a child. And I know you will walk away afterward and tell yourself you had no choice, when the truth is you are just too afraid to do what is right. Kale's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. I do not have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not when the cost is too high. Then you have already chosen, Mira said. And you chose wrong. For a long, tense moment, neither of them moved. Then Kale stepped back and returned to the window without another word. Mira sat down again, her heart pounding, her wrapped hands still aching. The stars continued their slow rotation across the window frame. The moon set. The sky began to pale at the eastern edges, the first hint of dawn creeping into the darkness. Kale finally spoke. The mark on the boy, he said. You said it was not a curse. Mira looked up, surprised. It is not. How do you know? I examined it. Closely. For 3 nights. Mira straightened slightly. Cursed marks spread. They rot living tissue, leave cold spots, darken the veins around them. Rowan's mark does none of those things. Then what is it? Mira hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I think it is something the council does not want anyone looking at too closely. Kale turned from the window. Explain. The ash test during the binding ritual, Mira said. Cursed marks attract moon ash. The ash should stick to cursed skin, turn black on contact. That is how the test works. And Rowan's mark repelled the ash. It slid right off his skin like water off oiled leather. Kale's eyes sharpened. You witnessed this. Yes, and so did Varric. That is why he rushed the trial, started it an hour early before anyone else could notice. Kale was silent for several long seconds, his expression unreadable. Then he moved across the room and crouched in front of her. Show me your hands. Mira held them out, palms up, still wrapped in his makeshift bandages. Kale unwrapped the cloth carefully and examined the damage. The scrapes had already started to close, new pink skin forming at the edges far faster than normal human healing would allow. He looked at her, those silver eyes intent. You are a healer. Yes. A strong one. I do what I can. Kale's thumb brushed very lightly across one of the half-healed cuts, and Mira felt a strange warmth spread through her hand. Not pain, not fever. Something else. Something that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. She pulled her hand back. What are you doing? Testing a theory. Kale stood. The boy's mark repels moon ash. Your touch accelerates healing beyond normal shifter recovery rates. Both are indicators of something old. Older than this council. Older than their laws. Mira's pulse quickened. What are you saying? I am saying, Kale said slowly, deliberately, that the council may have declared that child cursed specifically to hide what he actually represents, which is proof. The single word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Mira stood. Proof of what? That the moon fracture is not a curse at all. Kale moved back to the window and looked out at the dawn light beginning to spread across the sky. It is a seal. A seal, Mira repeated. On what? On the council's power. Kale's voice had gone very quiet. 5 years ago, I started asking questions about where the council's authority actually came from. Why the moon ash bindings worked the way they did. What the fracture marks really meant, and why only certain bloodlines manifested them. He paused. The council did not appreciate my curiosity. They used blood oaths to silence me and forced me into exile. And you think, Rowan? I think that boy is living proof that their entire system is built on a lie, Kale said, and they would rather burn him than let anyone discover the truth. Mira's mind was racing now, pieces clicking together. Then we have to stop them. We cannot. You just said, I said what I believe to be true, Kale interrupted. That does not change the immediate facts. You are sentenced to burn at sunrise. The boy is sentenced to burn immediately after you. And I am bound by oath to carry out both executions. Then break the oath. It will kill me. Mira stared at him. What? Blood oaths are not symbolic, Mira. They are binding at the cellular level. Kale turned to face her fully. They end in one of two ways. Either the person who holds the oath releases you willingly, or you die attempting to break it. Who holds yours? Kale's expression went cold and hard. Varric. Understanding crashed through Mira like a wave. He has been controlling you for 5 years. Yes. And if you refuse to execute me tomorrow, the oath will kill you instead. Correct. Mira crossed the room to him. Then let it. Kale looked at her like she had lost her mind entirely. Excuse me? Let the oath kill you, Mira said. You said they end when you die. If you die, Varric loses his hold on you permanently. That is not a solution to anything. It is if you do not stay dead. Kale's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you suggesting? Mira held out her hands, palms up, showing him the cuts that were already mostly healed. I am a healer, Kale. I have brought people back from the edge of death before. If you refuse the oath and it tries to kill you, I can pull you back. I can keep you alive long enough for your body to break the binding. That is completely insane. Do you have a better plan? Kale stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him turning the idea over in his mind, looking for the flaw, the failure point. If it does not work, he started. Then we both die trying, Mira finished, which is still better than watching them burn an innocent child and doing nothing. Kale looked at her hands, at her face, at the absolute determination in her eyes that would not bend or break no matter what he said. You are completely out of your mind, he said finally. Probably. A ghost of something that might have been a smile touched the corner of his mouth. If this actually works, you are going to be extraordinarily difficult to kill. Good, Mira said. Now let's get out of this tower before dawn. The iron door was locked from the outside with a bar that was likely reinforced and guarded. Kale examined it for approximately 3 seconds. Then his fist went through the metal in a single devastating strike that echoed through the stone corridor like thunder. The sound would wake half the temple. They had minutes at best. They ran. The temple was beginning to stir around them, candles flickering to life in distant windows, voices calling out in confusion as alarm bells started their harsh clanging somewhere above. Kale led them through a side passage Mira had never seen in 6 years of living here, down a narrow staircase that smelled like old stone and underground water, deeper into the lower levels where the council kept the things they did not want common knowledge, including condemned children waiting for purification. Rowan was in a cell at the end of a long corridor, curled into the corner with the white death cloth still draped over his shoulders like a ghost. Mira's heart clenched so hard it hurt. Kale broke the lock with his bare hands. Rowan looked up, his eyes wide with terror that shifted instantly to disbelief when he saw Mira. Mira! She caught him as he scrambled to his feet and ran to her, wrapping her arms around his small, shaking body. I have got you. You are safe now. They said they were going to burn me, Rowan said against her shoulder, his voice muffled and broken. I know, sweetheart, but we are leaving. Right now. Footsteps echoed down the corridor behind them. Voices. The guards had figured out where they were. Kale's hand closed around Mira's arm. We need to move. Now. They ran again, Rowan clinging to Mira's hand, Kale leading them through passages that should not exist according to any map Mira had ever seen, twisting deeper into the temple's ancient foundation. And then they hit a solid wall. Dead end, stone, no door, no window, just blank rock. The guards were getting closer, their shouts bouncing off the narrow walls. Kale turned to Mira. Can you break stone? What? Your healing power. Can it work on stone? I heal living things, not try anyway. Mira pressed both hands against the wall. She had no idea if this would work, but she closed her eyes and reached for that warmth deep in her chest, the thing that knit bone and sealed wounds and coaxed dying cells back to life. She pushed that warmth into the stone. The wall cracked. Light poured through the fissure, bright and cold. And Mira realized with a shock that they were at the cliff face, the temple built directly into the mountain, and beyond this wall was nothing but open air and a drop that went down for what looked like miles. That is not an improvement, Mira said. Can you fly? Kale asked. No. Then we jump. Are you completely insane? Kale looked at her, his silver eyes steady and utterly serious. You wanted a choice that was not execution. This is it. The guards were maybe 20 feet away now. Mira looked at Rowan, then at the terrifying drop beyond the cracked wall, then back at Kale. If we die from this, I am going to be extremely upset with you, she said. Then she grabbed Rowan tight against her chest, and they jumped. The fall lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Kale shifted midair, his human form exploding into something massive and black and furred, and he caught them both on his back as they hit the steep slope below the cliff edge. They did not stop falling. They slid, tumbled, half-rolled down the mountainside through terrain that should have killed them all, but Kale's wolf form absorbed the worst of it, and somehow, impossibly, they survived. He did not stop running until the sun was fully risen, and the temple was nothing but a distant speck on the mountain behind them. When he finally halted in a small clearing surrounded by dense forest, Mira slid off his back and collapsed into the grass, still holding Rowan, both of them shaking and alive. Kale shifted back to human form and stood over them, breathing hard, his clothes somehow intact despite everything. Are we safe? Rowan asked in a tiny voice. Mira looked up at Kale. For now, he said. Then he dropped to his knees, his hand going to his chest, and Mira saw silver threads burning beneath his skin like molten metal. The blood oath was activating. It's starting, Kale said through gritted teeth. Mira lunged forward, pressing both hands to his chest. Don't you dare die on me now, Kale Thorne. Kale's eyes met hers, silver already fading to gray. If this doesn't work? It will work. I'm not letting you die. The oath threads tightened, burning brighter, and Kale's breath went ragged and harsh. Mira closed her eyes and reached deeper than she ever had before, pulling on every ounce of power she possessed, every life she had ever saved, every wound she had ever closed, every impossible thing she had ever managed through sheer, stubborn will. She poured all of it into him. The oath fought back viciously. It burned. It clawed. It tried to tear him apart from the inside, cell by cell. And Mira held on. She felt Kale's heart stutter. Felt it stop. No. She pressed harder, her own hands burning now, her breath coming in gasps, and she absolutely refused to let go. Come back, she said out loud. Come back to me. 1 heartbeat. Another. Then Kale's chest expanded with a shuddering breath, and his eyes opened, silver again, locked on hers with an intensity that made her dizzy. The oath threads shattered into nothing. Kale sat up slowly, staring at his hands, at the place where the binding had burned beneath his skin for 5 years. It's gone, he said, his voice rough with disbelief. Mira sagged back onto the grass, her hands still trembling with residual power. Told you it would work. Kale looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and caught her hand gently, carefully, like she might break. Thank you, he said quietly. Rowan crawled between them and pressed his small hand against Kale's chest, right where the oath mark had been. Are you okay now? Kale looked down at the boy, really looked at him, and something soft moved across his expression. I am now, he said. They rested in the clearing until the sun was high overhead, hidden from any pursuit by the dense forest canopy. Mira checked Rowan's mark again while Kale kept watch, and this time she showed him exactly what she had seen during the ash test. "You were right," Kale said quietly, studying the crescent moon mark. "It repels the ash, which means it is definitely not a curse." "Then what is it?" Rowan asked, his voice small but curious. Kale's jaw tightened. "It's a seal, one that prevents the council's corruption from spreading into certain bloodlines." "My bloodline?" "Possibly." Kale looked at Mira. "We need to find out where this child actually came from, and why the council wanted him dead badly enough to stage a public trial." Mira nodded slowly. His mother brought him to the temple 3 months ago. She was dying, could barely walk. She asked me to keep him safe, said the council had lied about what the marks meant. "Did she say anything else?" "She said Rowan's father had died trying to prove the marks weren't curses." Mira's voice dropped. "She said he had been getting close to the truth when the council silenced him." Kale went absolutely still. "What was his father's name?" "She never told me. She died the next morning." Kale looked at Rowan for a long, searching moment, and Mira saw recognition flash across his face. "What?" she asked. "I think," Kale said slowly, carefully, "that this boy is the son of the man who helped me start asking the dangerous questions 5 years ago." Mira's breath caught. "You knew his father?" "He was my brother. My blood brother." Rowan stared up at him with wide eyes. "My father had a brother?" Kale nodded once. "And if I'm right about who you are, then you're not just proof that the council is corrupt." He reached out and touched the crescent mark on Rowan's chest very gently. "You're the heir to a bloodline they've been trying to erase for an entire generation." Understanding crashed through Mira. That's why they wanted him dead. "Yes." Rowan looked between them, his small face confused and frightened. "What does that mean?" Kale's expression softened just slightly. "It means you are not cursed, Rowan. You are royal. And the people who tried to kill you are going to answer for what they've done." "How?" "Because," Kale said, "we are going to expose them. All of them." In the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees, with a healer who had risked everything for a stranger's child, and an alpha king who had finally found something worth breaking his chains for, a plan began to take shape. They would need allies. They would need evidence. They would need to move carefully and quickly. But as Mira looked at Kale, and Kale looked at Rowan, and all 3 of them sat together in the safety of the forest, she felt something that might have been hope beginning to bloom, because some things were worth fighting for. And this child, sitting between them with determination starting to replace the fear in his eyes, was absolutely one of them. They had survived. Now they would make sure every child like Rowan had the chance to do the same. The clearing where they rested was small, ringed by ancient oaks whose roots had broken through the forest floor in thick, gnarled tangles. Mira sat with her back against one of those roots, watching Rowan sleep curled against her side while Kale paced the perimeter like a caged wolf. They had maybe 4 hours before the council sent trackers. "We cannot stay here," Kale said finally, stopping his pacing. "They will send hunters. Good ones." "How long do we have?" Mira asked quietly, not wanting to wake Rowan. "Sunrise to midday, before they organize." After that, he did not finish the sentence. Mira looked down at Rowan's sleeping face, still pale with exhaustion. "He cannot run much further without rest. Real rest. Not just a few hours on the ground." "I know." Kale crouched beside them. "There is a place, 3 days' travel north, an old settlement that predates the council. They do not answer to anyone. Will they shelter us? If we can reach them." Kale's eyes were on Rowan now, assessing. "The boy. Can he shift yet?" Mira shook her head. "He is too young. Most shifter children do not manifest until 6 or 7. He is already 6. Barely. And he has been through trauma. That delays things." Kale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We should move soon, while we still have daylight." They woke Rowan gently. Mira gave him water from a stream Kale had found, along with dried meat from the small pack Kale had somehow acquired during their escape. Rowan ate mechanically, his eyes still glazed with exhaustion and shock. "Rowan," Mira said softly, kneeling in front of him, "can you walk for a while longer? We need to put more distance between us and the temple." He nodded without speaking. They walked for 3 hours through terrain that grew steadily rougher, Kale leading them along paths that barely existed, using game trails and stream beds to hide their tracks. Rowan stumbled twice, and the second time Kale simply picked him up and carried him without breaking stride. When they finally stopped for the night, Rowan was asleep on Kale's shoulder. Kale set him down carefully in a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock, and Mira covered him with her cloak. "He trusts you," Kale observed quietly. "He has no one else. He has you." Mira looked up at Kale, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "I am just a healer who made a very stupid choice. You are the person who stood between him and death when everyone else walked away," Kale said. "That is not stupid, that is brave." Mira felt heat rise in her cheeks and looked away. Says the man who spent 5 years hiding in the wilderness. "I was not hiding," Kale said quietly. "I was waiting." "For what?" "For this." He gestured at Rowan, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. "For proof that I was right about the council. For someone willing to fight. And now that you have it?" Kale's smile was grim. "Now we burn their entire system to the ground." The next 2 days passed in a blur of travel and fear. Kale kept them moving at a pace that was just barely sustainable, stopping only when Rowan collapsed from exhaustion. At night, Kale taught Mira how to mask their scent using certain plants, how to walk without leaving tracks, how to read the forest for signs of pursuit. On the third morning, Rowan woke with a fever. Mira felt it the moment she touched his forehead. Hot. Too hot. "Kale," she said urgently. He was beside her in seconds. "What is wrong?" "Fever. High." Mira pressed her hand to Rowan's chest, over his heart, and reached for her healing sense. What she found made her stomach drop. The mark. The crescent moon. It was active, pulsing with some kind of energy she had never felt before. "His mark," she said. "Something is happening to it." Kale pulled Rowan's shirt aside and they both stared at the crescent. It was glowing faintly, silver light pulsing in rhythm with Rowan's heartbeat. "Has it done this before?" Kale demanded. "Never." Rowan's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "It hurts," he whispered. Mira pressed both hands over the mark, pushing her healing power into him, trying to cool the fever, but the mark resisted her, not violently, just differently, like it was protecting itself, or protecting him. "We need to get him to the settlement," Kale said. "Now." He picked Rowan up, cradling him against his chest, and started running. Mira had never seen a shifter move so fast while still in human form. She struggled to keep up, branches whipping past her face, her lungs burning. They reached the settlement just as the sun began to set. It was older than anything Mira had ever seen. Buildings made from stone and aged wood, arranged in no pattern she recognized. Symbols carved into doorframes and windowsills. The smell of herbs and something older, wilder. People emerged as they entered the main square. Shifters, but different. Their eyes held colors Mira had never seen. Their scents were complex, layered with things she could not identify. An elderly woman stepped forward, her hair silver, her eyes a deep amber that seemed to see right through them. "Alpha King," she said, inclining her head slightly. "We did not expect you, and with guests." "Thana," Kale said. "The boy is sick. His mark is active." Thana's expression sharpened instantly. She moved to Kale's side and placed one weathered hand on Rowan's forehead. Her eyes widened. "Bring him," she said, quickly. They followed her into the largest building, which turned out to be some kind of healing house. Thana directed Kale to lay Rowan on a low bed, then ushered everyone else out except Mira. "You are his healer," Thana said. It was not a question. "I am trying to be," Mira said. "Show me the mark." Mira pulled Rowan's shirt aside. The crescent was glowing brighter now, silver light pulsing faster. Thana drew in a sharp breath. "Blessed ancestors. It is real." "What is real?" Mira asked desperately. "What is happening to him?" Thana looked at her with eyes that held centuries of knowledge. "Child, this is not a curse mark. It is a seal, a very old one, and it is breaking." "Breaking?" Mira's heart lurched. "Is that killing him?" "No." Thana smiled slightly. "It is setting him free." Over the next hour, Thana explained what Mira had never been taught, what the council had hidden for generations. The moon fracture was not a curse. It was a seal placed on certain bloodlines by the first council, hundreds of years ago. A seal that suppressed power, raw, ancient power that the early council had feared. They called it purification, Thana said quietly. But what they really did was cripple entire family lines, made them weak, controllable. And now? Mira looked at Rowan, still fevered but breathing easier. Now the seal is breaking because he has been exposed to true healing. Your healing. Thana looked at Mira with new respect. You carry the old blood too. Your touch has been waking his power. Mira's mind reeled. I am not. I am just a healer. Child, there is no such thing as just a healer, not with hands like yours. Rowan stirred on the bed. The glow around his mark was fading now, settling into a steady silver shimmer that looked almost beautiful. He opened his eyes. They were different. Still brown, but brighter, clearer. Mira, he said. She grabbed his hand. I am here. I do not hurt anymore. He sat up slowly, looking around in wonder. I feel different. That is because you are, Thana said gently. Your power is waking, young one. You are becoming what you were always meant to be. Over the next few days, as Rowan recovered, Kale and Mira learned the full truth. The council had spent centuries consolidating power by sealing away anyone who threatened them. The marks were not curses, they were prisons. And now, because Mira had refused to condemn Rowan, because Kale had broken his blood oath, because they had escaped, the seal had broken, which meant the council would stop at nothing to kill them all. They will come for you, Thana warned. Once they realize the boy's seal is broken, they will send everyone they have. Let them come, Kale said grimly. But Thana shook her head. You do not understand. There are others, children like Rowan, adults who survived the purifications, all of them sealed, imprisoned in their own bodies. Mira felt ice in her stomach. How many? Hundreds, scattered across the territories, hidden, afraid. We need to find them, Mira said immediately. Warn them, help them break their seals. Kale looked at her. That is a war. Yes, Mira said. It is. Kale's smile was sharp and dangerous. Good. I have been waiting 5 years for a war worth fighting. They stayed at the settlement for a week, planning. Thana provided maps, names, safe houses. Other settlement members volunteered to help, to spread word, to guide others to safety. Rowan's power continued to grow. Small things at first. He could make water freeze with a touch. He could sense emotions. He could hear heartbeats from across a room. He is strong, Thana said one evening, watching Rowan practice. Stronger than any I have seen. That is what the council was afraid of, Kale said. Yes, and they were right to be. On their last night at the settlement, Kale found Mira sitting alone by the fire. You did not have to come with us, he said quietly, sitting beside her. Thana would shelter you here. You could be safe. I stopped being safe the moment I decided Rowan's life mattered more than mine, Mira said. I am not interested in going back. Kale was quiet for a moment, then he said, I am glad. Mira looked at him, surprised. I am glad you refused to condemn him, Kale continued. I am glad you fought. I am glad you lived. He met her eyes. I am glad you are here. Something warm bloomed in Mira's chest, something that had nothing to do with healing power. I am glad too, she said softly. They left at dawn, heading toward the first settlement where other marked children were rumored to be hidden. Rowan walked between them, no longer the terrified 6-year-old from the courtroom. He stood straighter now, moved with growing confidence. Are we going to save everyone? He asked. Mira looked at Kale. Kale looked at her. We are going to try, Mira said. And if we fail, then we fail fighting, Kale said. Which is better than dying on our knees. Rowan nodded solemnly. My father died fighting, my mother said. She said he never stopped trying to help people. Then we will honor him, Kale said, by finishing what he started. The journey ahead would be dangerous. The council would hunt them, others would die. But as they walked into the morning light, 3 people who should have been dead, 3 people who had refused to accept the world as it was, and chosen to fight for what it should be, Mira felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Real, solid, unbreakable hope. They had survived the impossible. Now they would do the impossible. They would free every child like Rowan. They would expose every lie the council had told. They would break every seal and burn every corrupt law until nothing remained but truth. It would take time. It would take sacrifice. It would take everything they had and more. But they had already given everything once and lived. They could do it again. And this time, they would not be alone. The first settlement they reached was 3 weeks' travel from Thana's Haven. 3 weeks of moving through territories Mira had never seen, staying off main roads, sleeping in caves and hollow trees, always watching the horizon for signs of pursuit. KL taught them how to move like ghosts, how to read wind for scents that did not belong, how to hide in plain sight by becoming part of the landscape. Rowan absorbed everything with the hungry focus of a child who understood his life might depend on these skills. The settlement was called Ashwater, named for the river that ran through it, dark with minerals from the mountain. 40 families lived here, scattered across a valley that the council maps did not acknowledge existed. They arrived at sunset, and within an hour word had spread that the Alpha King had come, and he had brought a child with a broken seal. The gathering happened in the central hall, a building made from river stone and timber that had stood for centuries. 200 people crowded inside, their faces wary, hopeful, terrified in equal measure. Kale stood at the front, Mira beside him, Rowan between them. An older man stepped forward, his hair gray, his eyes sharp. "Is it true?" he asked. "The boy's mark is broken?" "Show them," Kale said quietly. Rowan pulled his shirt aside. The crescent moon mark gleamed silver in the firelight, no longer cracked, no longer a fracture, whole, powerful, free. The room erupted in whispers. "We have 6 children here with marks," the man said. "All sealed, all condemned by the council but hidden by their families. Can you break their seals too?" Mira stepped forward. "I can try, but I need to understand something first. Why did your families hide them instead of fleeing like we did?" A woman in the back spoke up, her voice shaking. "Because they take your whole family if you run, everyone you love. They call it collective purification. My daughter has the mark. If I had run, they would have taken my son too. My husband. My parents. Everyone." Mira's throat tightened. "So you chose to stay and hide her?" "We chose to keep her alive," the woman said. "Is that wrong?" "No," Mira said softly. "That is brave." Over the next 3 days, Mira worked with each marked child. The process was different every time. Some seals broke easily, melting away under her touch like ice in sunlight. Others fought, requiring hours of patient, careful work. A 7-year-old girl named Sira, a 9-year-old boy named Tommen, twin sisters, barely 4, who held hands the entire time and refused to let go. A teenager named Kira who had lived with her seal for 13 years and wept when it finally broke. And a 5-year-old boy named Ash who reminded Mira so much of Rowan it hurt to look at him. Each time a seal broke, Mira felt the cost in her own body. Exhaustion that went bone deep, headaches that lasted for hours. But she kept going. Because every child who walked out of that healing room with a whole mark and clear eyes was a child the council could not control anymore. On the 4th day, a runner came from the eastern border. "Council trackers," he gasped. "Half a day out, maybe 20 of them, armed." The settlement erupted into controlled chaos, families gathering their children, packing essential supplies, preparing to scatter into the mountains. Kale pulled Mira and Rowan aside. "We need to leave, now. They are tracking us, not the settlement." "We cannot lead them away," Mira protested. "That just makes us easier to catch." "We will not be leading them away." Kale's eyes had gone cold and predatory. "We will be drawing them into a trap." "What kind of trap?" "The kind that shows the council what happens when they hunt the wrong prey." Kale's plan was audacious and probably suicidal, which was why Mira was not surprised when he explained it. They would let the trackers find them, but not in the settlement, in the narrow canyon 5 miles north, where one person with the right skills could hold off an army. "You have those skills?" Mira asked. Kale's smile was all teeth. "I spent 5 years in the wildlands learning how to survive against packs of hunters. 20 trackers will not be a problem. And what are Rowan and I supposed to do while you are fighting 20 armed shifters? You will be taking the children we freed to the next safe house. North. 2 days' travel." Thana gave me the location. Mira stared at him. You want me to leave you? I want you to protect those children while I handle the people trying to kill us. Alone. I work better alone. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Kale grabbed her shoulders gently. Mira, those children need you. Their seals are freshly broken. They are vulnerable. If the council catches them now, they will reseal them, or worse. You can get them to safety. I cannot. And you think you can survive 20 trackers alone? I know I can. Mira wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him that splitting up was exactly what the council would want them to do. But she looked at Rowan, at the other marked children gathering their things, at the families trusting her to keep their babies safe, and she knew KL was right. Do not die, she said finally. I will do my best. Your best better includes staying alive, Alpha King. Something warm flickered in Kale's silver eyes. For you? Anything. They separated at dawn. Mira leading 6 children and 3 parents north through terrain that was steep and unforgiving. Kale heading toward the canyon alone, leaving a trail obvious enough that a blind tracker could follow it. The journey north took 2 days, just as Kale had said. 2 days of carrying exhausted children, of soothing nightmares, of checking constantly for pursuit. They reached the safe house at sunset on the 2nd day, a compound built into the mountainside, invisible from the valley below. 30 people lived here, all of them refugees from council territories, all of them ready to shelter more. Mira handed the children over to waiting healers and allowed herself exactly 10 minutes to collapse against a wall and shake. Then she started planning how to go back for KL. She did not have to wait long. He arrived 2 hours after sunset, covered in blood that was mostly not his, favoring his left side, but alive. Mira was on her feet and running before she realized she had moved. You are hurt, she said, her hands already reaching for him. I am fine. You are bleeding. Flesh wound. Kale. I said I am fine, but he let her pull him into the healing room anyway. The wound in his side was deep, a knife strike that had slipped between his ribs. Mira cleaned it with hands that shook and poured her healing into it with more force than necessary. What happened? She demanded. They are dead. All of them. Mira looked up sharply. All 20 trackers? 18. 2 fled. Will they report back? Eventually. Kale's eyes met hers. We have maybe a week before the council sends more. Better equipped. More dangerous. Then we keep moving. Yes. Mira finished sealing the wound and sat back, exhausted. How many more settlements are there? Thana's map shows 12, all of them with marked children, all of them hidden. And how many of those children do you think we can free before the council catches us? Kale's smile was grim. All of them. That is impossible. Good. I have always preferred impossible odds. Despite everything, despite the exhaustion and fear and impossibility of what they were attempting, Mira found herself smiling. You are completely insane, she said. Says the healer who jumped off a cliff for a child she barely knew. Fair point. They stayed at the mountain compound for 3 days, long enough for Kale's wound to fully heal, long enough for Mira to rest and regain her strength. On the morning of the 4th day, they gathered the children who wanted to come, the ones who were strong enough to travel, the ones whose families had agreed to let them go. 5 children, all with broken seals, all learning to use powers the council had spent their lives suppressing, including Rowan, who could now freeze water solid with a thought and sense emotions like colors in the air. They headed west this time, toward settlements Kale had mapped years ago during his exile, toward more marked children waiting to be freed, toward a war that was only beginning, but they were not alone anymore. Word was spreading, through runner networks, through secret channels, through whispered conversations in markets and taverns and places. The council did not think to watch. The Alpha King had returned. The seals were breaking. The children were waking. And nothing the council did was going to stop it. Over the next 2 months, they freed 43 more children. 43 seals broken. 43 young shifters discovering powers they had never known they possessed. The council sent hunters, mercenaries, assassins. KL killed them all. Mira healed the wounded, taught the children to control their newfound abilities, built a network of safe houses and allies that grew larger every day. And slowly, carefully, they began to strike back, freeing sealed adults, destroying council outposts, exposing corruption, burning the lies one revelation at a time. It was not easy. They lost people, good people, brave people who stood against the council and paid with their lives. But they also won. Every child freed was a victory. Every seal broken was a blow against centuries of oppression. Every family reunited was proof that the council's power was not absolute. 6 months after their escape from the Bone Tower, Mira stood on a ridge overlooking a valley where 200 freed individuals had gathered, children and adults, all with whole marks, all with power flowing through them like rivers breaking free of dams. Rowan stood beside her, taller now, stronger, his eyes bright with purpose. "We did it," he said quietly. "We are doing it," Mira corrected. "This is not over yet. Will it ever be over?" Mira looked at Kyle, who was talking strategy with settlement leaders below, looked at the children playing without fear for the first time in their lives, looked at the future they were building together. "Maybe not," she said. "But that is okay. Some fights are worth fighting forever." Rowan smiled and took her hand. "Then we will keep fighting." "Yes," Mira said. "We will." And they did.